in part because I'm not able to really take very good notes during this while I'm sort of doing this other part. So so just be aware it's being recorded, and anything you know bring up verbally as well as in the chat we'll be saving. So we'll have a good record of that. A few quick notes on sort of how this works. A number of us have been doing this for a year or more now, but I know not everybody has. So real briefly, everybody's muted right now and will be until we get to the feedback and questions portion. If you do have a technical problem, as we're moving forward here, something's not working for you, go ahead and feel free to raise your hand for that, and we can see if we can help you before we get too deep into this. Otherwise, if you could hold the questions until we sort of get over the overview and to the feedback portion, that would be great. And prefer you don't put questions or comments related to the topics in the chat. We'd really like to just kind of hear from you verbally. So try and keep the chat to just sort of if you're having technical issues. Those of you on the phone are saying, what's the chat? Probably you don't have access to it because it's only available on the computer and in the app. And so same thing for you in terms of being muted for now. When we get to you, for at least a number of you, it looks like what we have is your last four numbers of your phone number. So we'll recognize you from that, give you a chance to unmute yourself. And to do that, you'll either dial *9 and wait to hear you have been unmuted on that phone. For some of you, may also need to dial *6. So try *9 when the time comes. If that doesn't work for you, try *6. You don't have the ability, you on the phone, to raise your hand. And so what we'll probably do is just ask you, do you have something to say? You can unmute and say, yes, I'm so-and-so, and I'm this phone number, and I've got a few comments. We may just, depending on how things are going at that point, we may just put you on a list and get to you in order, but we will get to you. So if we just ask for your name and then don't immediately say, please give us your feedback right then, it's because we're trying to get you scheduled and just sort of get it in order, not because we're ignoring you. So we do want to hear from everybody. For folks that are on the app and computer, there's some phone numbers on here you largely don't need, but if for some reason you end up having trouble with the computer, you can go to those phone numbers and jump over to see if that helps. Those were in the news release as well. So when I move away from this slide, you'll no longer be able to see them. So if you've got the news release, just in case you need them, which hopefully you shouldn't. I've also got some links on the pages. I don't know if my mouse is showing, but up here at the top on all the slides to kind of give you lots of time to copy those down if you need to. Again, those should be familiar from the news release as well. So, and of course, you can always get them through some kind of a web search as well. So you should be able to get to that stuff. And then the big one is this email address at the bottom is our main point for contact to get a hold of us if you've got questions or concerns. Okay, so sorry that's taken longer than I meant to because I want to give time for people to talk. Try to be patient with us and with the other attendees. This is a little clunky compared to an in-person meeting, but it does work. And I've got a number of folks from ODFW on here to help track questions and help make sure we don't miss anybody. So would like to hear from as many folks as possible, but also want to make sure that we're respectful of the time you've all given and try to keep things moving along. So Michelle, anything popping up or anything I need to stop for, or are we good?
No, sounds like you're in good shape.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I wanted to give a quick recap on the first round of CARES Act. I wasn't planning on going into a ton of detail on what CARES Act is because it's been out for a little over a year, and I think a lot of folks are already pretty familiar with it, but I will hit it shortly. It's a federal aid package specifically to address lost revenues from COVID effects in the marine fishing and certain shellfish operations. Give a quick overview here of what happened in first round. We completed the distributions from the first round in January of this year. That claim period for round one covered February through June of 2020. The applications received, there was a total claimed losses of about $48.5 million. Of that, we were able to cover a little over 18 million with the funds available, which equates to about 38% of what was submitted. So I'll come back to this at some point. I think we've got a little bit lesser amount this time in round 2, and we do expect that the claims will probably exceed the available funds again, like they did last time. So I'll touch on that a little bit later. In total, we got 410 applications submitted. About 74% of those did receive payment. And we had a huge issue with errors and omissions in that round on the applications. Over 90% of them had some significant error or omission of data that required quite a bit of follow-up from Pacific states in the process. That'll be a big focus of what we want to fix in round 2, among other things. And I'm going to ask you guys to give me some feedback on these aspects as well when we get done with the overview. But I just put a few things that I think worked fairly well and some that we know didn't. We were still able to, despite the fact that it was much slower than we had anticipated due to the error issues, we did get our distributions for Oregon fisheries completed relatively quickly compared to most of the other states, at least Washington and Alaska. And then our approach was focused on a proportional revenue approach, which seemed to work pretty well. California did something different in round 1 that I've heard some negative feedback from, and Alaska's doing something different as well. We essentially summarized all the losses that were claimed and then compared it to the funds available and made a proportional adjustment. So the quick example, which is really simple, if the funds covered 50%, the funds we had covered 50% of the total claims. Everybody that was eligible got 50% of what they claimed. There was an exception for the large claims, which were adjusted downward, and that was an effort to adjust those maximum claims and help spread the funds out a bit more than would have occurred otherwise. And that seems to have worked fairly well. As I said, we had some real problems with errors that we think we can fix, and we'll talk a little bit about that. As a result of that, the distributions ended up taking quite a bit longer than we thought they would. And also, I know there's a number of folks I see on the attendees list that probably are aware of this. We did find some gaps in the plan relative to Oregon residents participating in out-of-state fisheries. The long and short of it, we got some new guidance or revised guidance from NOAA Fisheries after our round 1 was complete that clarified residency issues. Was kind of concurrently happening with Washington and Alaska finishing their spend plans. And so basically we realized that there was gaps in coverage, but it was after the funds had already been distributed. So we'll be looking for ways to address those gaps in this round as well for those folks. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So just as an overview, what does CARES round 2 look like? Congress appropriated another $255 million in March of this year. Our allocation of that is $13 million. So that's relative to about $16 million federal funds we got in round 1. The federal criteria given to us for qualifying loss is a loss of 35% or greater, and that's measured against past average revenues. In general, that's a 5-year average. We've been able to make some exceptions to the 5-year distance for 5-year period for people who weren't in business for the whole period. So there's some exceptions to that, but that's the general approach. Has to be due to COVID. It can't be a result of revenues lost for other purposes like personal circumstance or some other vessel damage or something else other than a COVID issue. Oregon or PSMFC are not going to be getting into or guiding this next bullet, which is that you can't be made more than whole relative to COVID funding. That's going to be a federal requirement. They'll be responsible for auditing that. And I'll back up. What I mean by that is there's several forms of several forms of COVID-related federal aid came out. And if you're a business that received those, you need to consider those as well as anything you might get from CARES Act relative to your average annual revenue, and the addition of that federal aid related to COVID can't create a situation where your annual revenue for the year you got COVID exceeds your past average. That's where the feds will say they think that makes you more than whole, in quotes. And there'll be an audit process. Potentially, you could be required to pay some of that back. That does not apply to aid that may have come that wasn't related to COVID. So for instance, I know there were some tariff relief programs that came out during this general time frame. Those are considered separate from this, so you don't need to worry about that as far as I understand. But anything related to COVID, some of the payroll protection loans and some other measures, you'll need to think about that. So we're going to work to clarify that as much as we can in our spending plan. What I can give you tonight is probably not particularly thorough in that regard. So I recommend you do some research as well on your own to check that out, because that's going to be a responsibility you'll have to pay attention to if you apply and receive CARES aid. So again, that's not something the state's operating or Pacific states. That's a federal requirement. Residency, I mentioned earlier that we had a gap in round one. The clarifying language we have from NOAA Fisheries now makes it very clear that the applicants residing in a state that has a CARES allocation have to apply in that state and only that state. So if you are a Oregon resident participating in Alaska fisheries as a non-resident of Alaska, you do not apply in Alaska. They are not accepting, nor will they be allowed to from the federal rule. They're not accepting non-residents with a few very small exceptions. We do have the scenario where if you are a participant in Oregon fisheries and you reside in a state that did not get a CARES allocation. So let's say you're from Iowa, but you have a participating license and you do participate in Oregon fisheries. In those situations, you would apply in Oregon. I don't anticipate we'll see many, if any, of those. But by and large, if you are an Oregon resident, for fishing in particular, you will be applying in Oregon, even if your revenues come from out of state. So that's a clarification from last time, and a fairly significant one. Finally, well, not finally, because I've got one more page. Just a reminder, I think folks who did round one or were familiar with round one already know this. This is a program that addresses marine and anadromous fisheries only, so it does not apply to freshwater fisheries unless they're anadromous based, so salmon, steelhead, sturgeon, those kinds of things. Freshwater fishery on trout, not going to be eligible for this approach. Eligible businesses, this is not different than round one. I pulled this directly from our round one process, but I'll just hit it real quickly. Obviously, commercial fishing businesses in the marine and anadromous arena. That includes certain shell fishing businesses. Again, no difference from how we did it in round one. So if you were eligible in round one, there's nothing that's going to make you not eligible now other than whatever your revenue situation was. Charter and for hire fishing businesses are included. Again, same criteria, has to be marine or anadromous. Certain aquaculture operations, and again, that will be the same sorts of criteria as round one, as with processors and other fishery related businesses. So gear manufacturers of trawl nets, for instance, and again, associated with marine and coastal. Does not include businesses farther down the chain. That's direct guidance from the Federal Act and from NOAA. So things like restaurants who are end users of seafood products are not eligible under CARES. This is really about the harvesting and production side. Okay, moving right along. Where are we? What's our process? What are we doing? Right now, we're building a spend plan. That's a plan on how we will, Oregon will plan to assess applications and distribute funds. That's what we're in progress right now. That's what we're looking for feedback from you tonight and after. After that, we will submit that plan to NOAA Fisheries. They'll review it, and if it's appropriate relative to their federal guidelines, they'll approve it. If not, they'll send it back to us and tell us what we need to fix. We think that'll happen fairly quickly this time. Part of the reason we're going to try not to change the spend plan any more than necessary and we're all pretty familiar with it now. So I expect that process to be pretty quick, though I don't know exactly how quick. And so it's a good point for me to mention. We can't give you a firm time frame right now because so many of these things are all sequential. And once we kind of start to get a sense of where everything lands, I can probably put out some better dates to give folks an idea. But at the moment, we're not quite there yet. NOAA has indicated that, and I'll point out a couple of the pieces of information that are particularly relevant for that as we move through. NOAA has indicated that these funds need to be moved over to the Pacific States Marine Fishery Commission by the end of September. That does not mean that the funds have to be paid out by then, but just that they have to be sort of contracted over and accounted for and moved into those accounts. And so we've got some time after that if necessary. I would like to be able to be real close to having it done by that point, if not sooner if we can, but we do have some more time. And again, we think we can get this done fairly quickly compared to the last round, with some exceptions that I'll talk to you folks about here. Get caught up here just a second. Once NOAA approves that, PSMFC will finalize their application process and open the applications. And then they'll be the entity, as in round one, responsible for gathering those applications and evaluating them against the spend plan. Then we'll start the application period. And this is a piece that I will welcome comment on here when we get to it, a couple of these. In round one, we did 30 days. We were really focused on trying to get that money out as quickly as we could. But in the end, I'm not sure 30 days was enough. And so there's a balance here between adding some time for folks to apply, which is a good thing, but dragging the process out by that same amount of time on the back end to get it completed, which could be a little bit of a bad thing depending on where you're at. So welcome some comments on whether 30 days is a good amount of time or whether there's a better number, 45 days or 60 days or something like that. Once the applications are in, PSMFC will review them again, check them against the spend plan, make sure that the requirements are met and that the eligibility is there. And they'll notify anybody who wasn't eligible for some reason, applied but didn't make the eligibility requirements. And excuse me, in round one, we only really allowed a week for folks to get back and submit amended applications to fix errors if they had them, or to dispute, make corrections or dispute the finding. And we did hear from some folks that wasn't enough time for them. So that's another place where I'm interested on what folks might think. Again, if we have an application period of 60 days, for instance, and a dispute period of 2 weeks, now we're to, was at 10 weeks from start of application before we can even think about issuing checks, as opposed to a month and a half potentially, or something like that if we did it in a more abbreviated fashion. So there's a balance there. There's a push-pull sort of thing in terms of, more timelines, probably better for the applicants on the front end, but it will delay the completion of the process by some amount, depending on what it is. So interested in what folks think about that. Then PSMFC will calculate everything up from the eligible applications, make the adjustments as necessary for maximum claims, calculate the payments for folks, and start mailing out checks. And I think that part actually went pretty quick. Once we got to it, the checks got out the door pretty quickly. So again, I don't have a firm timeline for you, but you kind of get a feel for a couple of the bottlenecks. One is us getting the spend plan done, of course. The other are really kind of associated with those application and review periods. So be thinking about those if you would. Okay, so moving right along, what are we looking at so far for round two? And again, these aren't final decisions, so looking for comments on these. Round one, we used February through June of 2020. Again, trying to get that money out and focused on the time frame that was really associated with that first round of CARES. And so we're proposing at the moment to just catch the latter half of the same year, so July through December of 2020. We know there's seasonality in the fisheries, so some folks who are in a fishery or fisheries that are more heavily weighted towards the latter half of the year probably didn't get the opportunity to either make a claim or to make as big a claim as they might if this period is covered compared to the February, June. And again, also, I think this was maybe not strictly a 2020 issue, but largely a 2020 in particular. And so there's some sense to us in logic to filling out the last half of the year. As of now, our anticipation is that as in round one, you were allowed to pick anything of 28 days or more, so 4 weeks of continuous time within that time period. So you could use the whole thing. You could use 3 months. You could use down as fine as 28 days minimum. And we would anticipate doing that again. As I mentioned, we need to figure out how to address the Oregon residents who are participating in out-of-state fisheries. And so we will be working to real clearly identify the residency requirements and evaluate those for their consistency with the Washington, California, and Alaska plans in particular, just to try and make sure we don't have gaps. Again, this is if you're an Oregon resident, that's the expectation is you would be applying in Oregon regardless of where you might fish or, multiple places you might fish. And you can't apply in another state for the same revenues. So probably not a surprise. And similarly, the Alaska, California, Washington residents are generally not, particularly for fishing activities, are not eligible to apply in Oregon either. So same criteria. And again, I mentioned a bit ago the length of time. We've heard some concerns about the length of time for application and review. And so we're looking to balance that against the timeliness of payment. In an effort to address the error issues, PSMFC is looking to implement an electronic process. I think we will have some paper form approach for those who just can't access the electronic process. I'm not quite sure of that yet. But it'll be a much more simple application process. One problem we noticed in the first round was it was a one form for everybody sort of application. And so under the electronic approach, you would get a specific application for your specific sector or sectors if you're in multiple sectors. For instance, if you do processing, buying, and fishing, and you'll only get the questions and information on the form that are required for that sector. You don't have to weed through any of the other stuff. So that should help. It'll also speed the process up on the back end. The process they're looking at has been used by some of the other fishery commissions for CARES in round one. So they feel like they've got a pretty good way to go at that. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll try and add a bunch more language to help clarify this more than whole issue so folks are aware of it. Okay, I went fast. I don't know if I went fast enough, but I was trying. And we're basically to the point now where I'd like to go ahead and open it for feedback and questions. These are just a couple of suggestions. You can throw other ones in there if you want, but what did we get right? What did we get wrong? What kinds of things could we do better? What kinds of questions or concerns do you have going into round two that you want us to be aware of and be thinking about? I'm going to move over to, again, this tab here so folks can get reminded of how to participate. Again, for folks on the computer, use the raise hand, and we'll be able to see who that is, and we'll try our best to take folks in order. Again, want to get to everybody before we're done here. So if we don't make the order perfectly, we definitely will come back to you. Do want to keep it moving along. So if folks are saying sort of the same sorts of things, I think we'll have got the message. We may ask you to kind of move on there, just so folks have lots of time. And then for folks on the phone, again, dial the *9. You should get a note that you've a voice that you've been unmuted. You may also need to do *6 to unmute. And lastly, if we don't get to your questions or if we run out of time, we've got an email address here that you can send those to, and we can definitely follow up after that. So I'm going to stop talking, at least for a bit, and see how things are going. Michelle, again, I'm going to leave this slide up for a bit, so I won't be able, I think I'll shut it down here in a few minutes, but for now I'm going to leave it up so I can't see what's going on relative to questions.
So I'm going to go ahead and start. We'll start pulling some over. We'll start with Andy here. I'll pull over, but I want to make sure that you recognize that there will be a small blip when you're being pulled over from attendee to panelist. So that is just you moving from one room to the next. So you're still there. Andy, I'm going to move you over. We'll start with you.
Okay, I think I'm in the panelist
Yep.
part now.
I hear you.
You guys can hear me? Great. Thanks, Chris. That was very helpful. I just had a few questions that I wanted to make sure we were straight with. We represent Bristol Bay fishermen, and they're pretty much out in the water right now, starting to catch fish. The eligible loss requirement, I just want to make sure that I understand that right. So basically you have to have a 35% loss on your, compared to your average fishing revenue for that 28-day period. Is that correct?
Yeah, Andy. The standard is 5 years. So, yeah. Let's try this again. Noah's standard has been 5-year average compared to. So let me give you an example. If a person had revenues that they wanted to make a claim on for July through August of 2020, let's say July 1 through August 31st, they would go look at what their revenue was in July through August of the prior 5 years, each of those 5 years, add it up and average it, and that would be their baseline. They would compare 2022. We do anticipate, as we did in round one, I think we allowed down to 2 years. So the 5-year period would be what, 2015 through 2019, I believe. If somebody didn't fish or wasn't a participant in the fishery yet, and let's say they came in later than 2015, I think we allowed 18 and 19 as sort of the minimum. But if you did fish in those 5 years, you have to claim all 5. Or you have to use all 5 in your average. You don't get to pick some to leave out.
Right, and that makes sense. And so then the loss is, essentially if you lost 35% or more, you had a decrease in revenue of that much, then you'd be eligible to get some portion of that back through the funding program here.
Yep. Yeah. So let me give you an example.
It's not up to 35%. It's you get some of that loss back. But if you're at 34% loss, you're just not eligible.
Correct. So I'll give you an example. This might be helpful for folks. If let's just say this particular participant's 5-year average was $100,000 revenue for that period, and they report 66,000 for 2020, they would miss the mark of a 35% loss. So they'd have to be 65,000 or less. And then we would count. So let's say it's 65,000, right on the 35% mark. We would count their loss as 35,000, and that would be what would be on the books for their loss. And then once we add up everybody's losses and find out we have a certain amount of money, we'll proportionally drop that down from whatever their main claim was down to an adjusted, if that makes sense.
So even if they weren't eligible at the 35%, they could still be eligible for funding to offset their loss. I guess I'm a little unclear on that. Like who sort of to the end, or who kind of progresses to, I guess, the point.
Right. It's a knife edge basically. If per the federal guidelines, if you were not at least 35% less revenue or more, 35, 36, 37, 50% less, you're just not eligible. Yeah. So if you were at 34,
I just want to be clear, then you essentially cannot get funding through this program, right?
Right, and that's from the federal side when they started it. That was the criteria. So
Okay.
If you're at 34% loss, you just don't qualify.
Right, but then once you're under 35, or once you're over 35% loss, you can essentially get funding that kind of gets you back to less than,
at least in part. Yeah,
right,
at least
possibly, right. I'm just saying, know how many, it depends.
Here, I'll say this, I don't think it's going to happen, but if for some reason we didn't, all the claims came in and it was less than or equal to the total we have, everybody would get the amount they claimed. I just really, that's not going to happen. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
A couple other questions, if I may here. I'm hoping some others, or maybe ask, maybe I can take some off the table from others too. But will those who fished in Alaska or other states be held to the same time frame? Like, do you need to make it July 1 through December 20th for everybody? Because they were left out the first round. So for some fishermen, that July 1st might be a problem. I mean, salmon season is kind of well underway for some fisheries by July 1st.
So would we make an exception for certain fisheries that got left out of round 1 for a different time period?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious if
Yeah.
you have the same time period for all applicants, given that, we had this sort of mismatch of eligibility in the first round.
It's a good question. I don't have an answer for you as to whether that's allowable or not. I would think that it might be. We'd have to think about what the complexity of doing it might be. I don't think there's anything from the federal side that would preclude it.
Okay.
But I'm a little leery of giving you more than that because I'm just not sure.
And I think July 1st could be doable, but I think you could run into some problems with people being eligible in some fisheries, which would mean they weren't sort of thought of in the first round, and then the time frame got them in the second one, and that's kind of two technicalities, and that'd be unfortunate, I think, for folks that otherwise that's who this funding was intended to help. Okay. My third question and last one is, so the folks that are residents and fish out of state, this is federal money coming into all the different state agencies and departments to be granted out. They weren't eligible for the first one. So is there any mechanism in your spend plan that's going to account for that, so that they're not essentially, I guess, thrown into the same pot the second time, getting the same share as everybody, even though they were left out the first time? Because my guess is that folks that were eligible and got payments the first round are also going to get some additional supplemental payments the second round. And, again, those folks that fish out of state, they weren't to do, even apply the first time around.
Yeah, I'm making some notes here.
So I'm just wondering if you can create a spend plan that sort of trues that up and, makes that fair, so that, and if they weren't excluded, I wouldn't be asking that question, but they were. So it just like, if they're treated the same this round, and they're not really being treated the same overall, And again, if it was Oregon money directly from Oregon residents and from the state, it'd probably be a little different, but this is federal money. So I think it's an important distinction, and I think it's a fair distinction,
Okay. I don't have an answer for you on that, but we'll make a note of that question and put it into consideration for this. Yeah. And it's kind of not the same question, but it's kind of related to the time frame question too. They're kind of not, I won't say fully connected, but there's definitely a linkage there. So
yeah, that would be great. However you want to get back to me or post it up on your guys' site, we'll be kind of keeping we'll be keeping our eye on it. And thanks so much for this. Those were my questions.
Appreciate it, Andy. Thanks. Okay, Michelle, how we doing?
We have Katie Pritchard as our next speaker.
Okay. Hi, Katie.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. So I'm going to kind of echo some of what Andy said. As you know, we've had some discussions over the last few months, but definitely I strongly encourage you guys to focus on those that were left out of round one, that there is some provision for them to, at the very least, be prioritized in the application process, whether it's a button that says I was unable to apply due to residency, or something that indicates that they missed the boat, not by their own doing, but because they legitimately were left out by all of our states. So that one I want to make sure to ring that bell again and again and again. And then I would also, say that what Andy said was vital too, is that while the people that are applying for round 2 that got round 1, maybe they get whatever that percentage is, to top them up. However, those people that were only now allowed to apply in round 2, but were left out of round 1 due to this clerical or administrative type error, there should be some kind of provision set aside for them to hopefully, be brought up to that same percentage that the person that got 1 and 2 is at. So that's kind of me just, again, ringing that bell loud and clear for all the fishermen that are currently on the water and unable to speak to you directly. The other one, again, same thing, is this is just such a huge, huge issue. My own permit holders that I know personally, and then many of my friends here locally in the Astoria, Warrenton area are in Alaska right now, but live here and have no direct communication. So those timelines, I know that we already had openers in June, and that happens frequently. So the timelines from round 1, it just, the time that salmon season is really that June to September timeframe. So while this July 1 to December could make sense for that, there might be a little bit of confusion in the application process. And I know you're looking for ways to make sure that isn't as, the errors, that 90% of error, I know that you want to make sure to try to find ways to correct that or to help alleviate that problem. So recognizing that these fishermen, many of whom are already fishing in June, specifically the ones that got left out, that's a big deal. So, and I think that's it on mine, so Andy covered it really well, but I just definitely wanted to make sure to chime in because there's a lot of people that are not able to tonight because they're out on the water.
Yep. Understood. So in there, I think I heard you advocating for trying to extend that application period if we can.
Not
necessarily.
I wouldn't necessarily the application. I should probably be more clear that the period, that July 1 to December, if there's a way, if when they indicate that they, whatever their fishery is, or if they indicate they were ineligible for round 1 due to residency, that it opens up that timeline to June 1st or something, or May 1st through December,
okay.
Something along that lines. If we're going to go digital, it seems like those things could be built in when they indicate that, that they are that person that got left out, that would send it there. But as far as the timeline, I know you were concerned about that, the timeline of the application process. I'm kind of with you on that I don't necessarily, if we extend it too far, we put people at risk, to extend out those checks, that they take a lot longer. But I do, if we keep it at 30 days, I want to stress the importance of the outreach that you and your team are being paid for to administrate this program, or administer this program, so that we need to have extreme focus on outreach and ways to get the word out to those people that can't even hardly send a text message right now, let alone do an electronic application for the next couple months maybe. So just to be considered. Thank you. I'll jump off my soapbox.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, our next speaker is Michelle Lango Eater.
Oh, okay. Hey, Michelle.
Hi, I put my hand down. Thank you.
Okay. Well, feel free to put it back up later if you need to.
So Chris,
Michelle, I'll just leave it to you to grab people and move them over and tell me who it is. So.
Okay. Am I just going down the list and moving people, or waiting for?
I think so. Yeah, I think that'll work.
While I'm moving some folks over, you do have a couple of questions that have come up in the chat.
Okay. Okay. So somebody named Lisa about filed the application, never heard back. I assume that, is Lisa on as somebody we can move over to the panel, Michelle? So I don't have to just go back and forth in chat.
Okay, I just moved Lisa over.
Okay, are you there? Go ahead and you may be muted. Oh, Lisa doesn't have a microphone showing for her. Okay. Let me do this. Lisa, if you can hear me, hopefully you got the email address off that prior page. It's also in the news release. So we can follow up by email some if that's helpful. I'm assuming you're asking about an application from round one. I could ask the PSMFC staff to look into that for you and get an answer back to you. I know there were a few folks where they tried to reach back out through letter or other means and were unable to contact anybody, either never heard a reply or phone number or something didn't work. But if you're looking at round one, we could probably figure it out and see if we can find out what happened.
Yeah, we just really like to know. I mean, we'll apply for round two as well, obviously, but knowing what we did wrong in round one, because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure percentage-wise we qualify.
Okay.
So I don't know where we went wrong in the application is the thing. And so
Okay.
having some feedback on that would be really helpful to making sure that we do it right the next time around.
Understood. Okay. And that was probably, was that for fishing?
Yeah, live fishing.
Okay. Yeah. Did you see the email address that you can shoot me a note maybe?
I will grab it in a minute.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Michelle, what else we got?
So we've moved David Zeller into the room and also James.
Okay. Let's go with David. If you're there. David, you're on mute. Or at least that's what it says on my end. There should be a little microphone button in the lower corner of your screen. Probably got an X through it. That's not working. We don't have you. Tell you what, why don't I, Michelle, can you leave him in there? We'll go to the next one and come back. So James, can you go ahead and unmute and you've got the floor? Nothing from, oh, David just went away. James, are you there? Can you unmute? Okay, I'm not getting anything. Again, we'll wait. We'll come back to you. John Gonzalez. John, if you're there, go for it. We can't go 0 for everybody. So we got to be able to get somebody's unmuted. Maybe it's a problem on our end. Oh, there we go.
Hey there. Actually, I did not mean to raise my hand, so if I did on accident, I apologize.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's go back, see if James got his worked out, unmuted. Can you try it again, James? It's that little microphone in the lower left corner of your screen should be. All right, well, again, we'll come back. I see Melanie Howie. Maybe can you try and unmute and see if we've got you? Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Technician down here on the South Coast for ODFW. And I deal with a lot of the charter captains. I don't know how many of them are on board here tonight, but I did hear that the Marine Board, as well as a few webinars, were available for people to learn how to do the application correctly. So I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but if not, I will try and find out from the one charter captain that told me about it and let you guys know so that can be placed on the websites.
Okay. Yeah, if you can find that out and get the information to us, that would be helpful. It's news to me. I'm wondering if it's a webinar on CARES or if it's a webinar on something to do with Marine Board licensing. But if you can find out the information, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I will do that for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. And let's go to Kathy Latimer next. And then James, you're still on there. I do still see you. Let's go to Kathy real quick. See if you can unmute yourself. Not seeing it yet. Oh. Kathy, if you're talking, we can't hear you. You need to unmute with the little microphone in the lower left corner. Click it so that it doesn't have a cross through it. Okay. Not seeing it. Or not hearing it in particular.
I'm just going down the list and pulling people over. I haven't had anyone else raise a hand.
Okay, but you're only pulling people that had their hand up, right?
No, because we only had like 4 and I just started pulling people over. I thought
okay. Well, yeah, okay. So all right. So yeah, if folks don't have something, that's fine.
it looks like Katie has some. I'm going to bring her back into the room.
Yeah, go ahead. That works. Katie, go ahead when you're ready.
All right, I'm back. It just had to switch over. I'm sorry, I'm never short of things to say, but I'm speaking for lots of people. So another note to be made is, just in chatting with somebody else, we had applicants that reside here in Oregon who have Washington permits, for instance, and that season runs, from April 1st to October 31st. So there's that same issue that I think, really needs to be magnified, to focus on those different timings for the fisheries. So, and again, that person was left out due to their permit being Washington, even though because they reside in Oregon. So,
okay.
That's
and
it.
Specifically, that's a Washington salmon permit?
No, that was a shrimp. Yeah.
Oh, that was shrimp.
Yeah. So that was kind of so there's just those other ones that as we hear from constituents, it's kind of, there's just so many of them, and a lot of them just don't even know about this. So in the beginning, even round 1. So I'm quite sympathetic to that because I'm knee deep in all this all the time. And I didn't know much about it either until you guys presented to us at the Coastal Caucus. So, but I just wanted to add that timeline to your notes to say, hey, I was screaming about May or June and realizing April might be more appropriate for the left out crew.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm done again.
That's fine. We're doing good on time. So, looks like Andy put his hand back up.
I'm going to go ahead and move Andy back to the room also.
Okay. Just go ahead whenever you're, he may not even hear me yet. Whenever you're ready, Andy. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, also not sure on things to say. Sorry, but hopefully this kind of flags something so it's not, something else to deal with later. But, Katie brought up a good point. I mean, there's going to be people out fishing no matter when you do this. And we don't want to make the window so long that it drags out the process. But, is it going to be possible for folks to say have their accountant apply on their behalf? Would it have to be like a I don't know, spouse or partner. Not everyone has those, right? So how, is there any way to make this work for someone who might not be able to get access to their tax files and their information for a 4 or 8-week period?
Okay. Make a note of that. I don't have an answer for you, but maybe there's something we can do. Certainly, I would anticipate that if it was a accountant or somebody that has something bordering on power of attorney, they'd probably be okay, but I don't know about the rest.
Right.
It's a good question. Good question. So.
That would seem like the most workable thing too, if someone could just essentially get their line and verify it somehow, right? And then they can get you guys the information you need.
Yeah. Michelle, I know we don't have any, I see we don't have any hands up, but I'm going to do a real quick one on the phones. I see somebody with the last 4 digits of phone with 2698 and somebody with the last 4 of 4152. I just ask if you guys or people, folks, have anything you want to jump in here since you're not able to raise your hand. Go ahead, and if you do, go ahead and unmute and just speak up. If not, that's fine too. We'll give you a couple minutes. Okay. Sounds like maybe not. It's not your only chance. If you think of something and we're still on, that's fine too. Not seeing any more hands. Let me just double check the chat box here, make sure we're not missing anybody. If anybody's having trouble piping up but does have access to the chat, you can throw a note in there just to make sure we're not missing anybody. And if not, I think we're headed towards wrapping up early and giving you some of your time back.
Chris, maybe one more that might, again, help solve problems before they get created. You mentioned there was 90% of the applications that had errors or omissions. You know, what were the nature of most of those? Were there ones that were really consistent?
Yeah, I think there was. One of them was related to an issue I don't think we're going to do this time, and it was some adjustments for the start of crab season, which wouldn't be relevant for this time period. I have to go back and check with the Pacific States folks, but the folks that worked on it definitely cataloged the majority of the errors, and those are the same folks that are working to try and build the electronic form. So I'm pretty confident they're going to be cross-referencing those lists, but I'll be asking when they get to the development part, which they're not quite there yet. So good point though. Yeah. And there was I know a number of the errors were related to calculating the average too, and I think they've got some ideas for how to collect that information in the electronic form such that it kind of does it on its own, so to speak. So that was another one I know was pretty common. I see Michelle Eder has her hand back up. Can we get her moved over?
Back in the room in just a moment. There we go.
If you can hear me, go for it, Michelle.
Thank you. Excuse me. To make a claim based on July 1st to December 31st, do we have to have fished in each of those months in 2020?
No, you can pick. The way we did it in round 1 is you could pick the time frame that you want to in that period, and then as long as you use that same time frame for your 5-year average, that's fine. So
excuse me, how long does that time frame have to be?
We had a minimum of 28 consecutive days, so 4 weeks.
So when it's 28 consecutive days, I mean, so you're talking about like we go out for 3 or 4 days, come back in or in for a couple of days, but it's go out so that we have landings
yeah.
within
Sorry.
a
Yeah,
28-day period?
You don't literally have to have been fishing for every one of those days. It's just you would pick a period of time to calculate your revenues that the whole period was no shorter than 28 days. So if it was, July 1 through 28th, any revenues within that whole period, regardless of what day they came on, you just count it as one block. Or if you wanted to do 37 days, you could do that too. So sorry.
Could you also
you can't, what I meant by consecutive is you can't take 4 days from one part of the period, 4 days from later, unless they're within the same window, so to speak. I don't know if that makes sense the way I said it, though. I fear it doesn't.
Let me just ask this. Can you take the whole period, July?
Oh, yeah,
1st,
absolutely.
December
Yep.
31st?
If you wanted to do that, you could. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Yeah, and the only thing you got to watch is that make sure your 5-year average period is using the same time frame. So if you do July through December, you just do July through December for those prior 5 years too. I see something in chat. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. I have to make that window smaller. Oh, Lori. Oh, thanks, Lori. I appreciate it. We'll do our best in this one too. If you have anything you want to say, feel free.
Hey, Chris, this is Andy again.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to flag how big of a deal I guess I'm thinking that July 1st, if you guys went with that and Oregon residents who fish in Bristol Bay were subject to that, might inadvertently, some of them might not be eligible for either if they need 20, before or after July 1st, because the season in Bristol Bay is so short. So I think it's just going to be important to recognize, some of these different seasonal dates, and the Bay is a pretty big fishery. So
yeah.
Like that for you. A lot of fishermen will maybe be done by the 23rd or 24th of July. And
yeah. Let me clarify. They would still be able to apply for just that 23 days. What they can't do is take they can't take the 28 days consecutive is really mostly intended to say you don't get to pick 4 days from the first week of July, 4 days from the last week of December, put them together and call it, a span, unless you're going to take the whole period and claim everything that happened in there. So it's really just to capture any fishing activity that occurred within a period and make sure you're standardizing that across your current year and your 5-year average. So if what I'm picturing here is if somebody only fished 23 days out of a 28-day period, they would just have revenue for the first 23 days and no revenue for the last 5. And that's fine. You just add it together and call it your gross revenue. So I don't know, does that make more sense?
Their last fish ticket might be the 22nd or 23rd.
Yeah. And that's not a problem.
Okay.
Particularly if it captures all the revenue they earn for the season, which is sounding like that would be the case, then it's totally fine. Yep.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, it's really about we allow the flexibility to mix and match a little bit within the period of claim, so that folks could focus really on the seasonality of their fisheries, and give them a little flexibility on how to do that. So that's really what that's for. Yeah. If anybody has questions about that or is still confused, because I'm afraid I'm not describing it well, just let me know. Michelle, I'm pretty sure you know how to get a hold of me. Andy, I know you do too. So the email address is in there as well. All right. Anybody else? Not seeing hands. Give another round. Anybody on the phone that wants to chime in, go ahead if you want to. I'm about ready to call this thing to adjournment here fairly soon. So again, if you think of something later you didn't get on the record or something you didn't really feel like saying here, totally fine. The email's there. I track that thing every day. as well as does John Seaborn, who's on here too. So we'll certainly get back to you. All right, well, I'm going to say we look like we have exhausted what we were doing for now. Thanks, Andy. Yep. Sorry it took so long to get the meeting together. I was hoping to get it done sooner, but this was as early as we could manage. So would have liked to have had it out before folks started leaving to go to Alaska, among other things. So, and Katie and others, thanks for being here. I think we're set. So thanks, Michelle. Again, feel free to reach out. The numbers are there, the email's there, and I appreciate everybody taking the time. We will be updating the website as we sort of near on getting stuff done. So if you haven't signed up on our ODFW website, there's an email notification button at the bottom. You can sign up and you'll get emails when we update that page. And as we move forward and PSNFC starts to get more involved in this round 2 for us, they will start having more stuff on their website too, which is psmfc.org. And you can pretty much navigate from there. So, okay. Well, I appreciate it. And to Michelle and Mary for helping me navigate this thing, thanks very much. And I hope everybody has a good week. I appreciate your time. Thanks.